Computers, the advertising claimed, were the key to the future. But in their enthusiasm, they failed to mention one thing.
In the late 1950s, the computer manufacturers' advertisements and proposals were rosy, and we who were making those promises turned out to be liars. We didn't know we were, but we were. The problem was software development.
Writing software, the programs that tell the computer what to do, turned out to cost 2, 3, even 4 times the price of the machine itself.
In fact, this problem of software development grew so severe that it really threatened the further growth of the computer industry.
Computers costing thousands of dollars a month would sit idle while programmers struggled to talk the computer's arcane language.
We BPX to 10D, AOR 10.
Well, this AOR gets us into a BSN 11. Don't we want a BSN 12 instead?
Unfortunately for programmers, computers cannot execute programs written in English. They require a special language of their own.
The computer only understands the language of binary, and it's really a code, not a language. Binary simply means zeros and ones, analogous to an electric light switch, which is either on or off. If one simply looks at an example of what the binary code would have to be for 5 times 7 plus 3, one can see that it's incredibly difficult to write that kind of thing accurately. In the first place, it's tedious to write it, and in the second place, it's almost impossible to do it correctly.
Programmers developed alphabetic codes which were easier than binary. But still, programming was difficult and tedious, and few people were attracted to it.
The shortage of programmers could, in the worst case, have caused the growth of the computer industry to come to a dead halt because there were so few programmers. Without programmers, you don't have programs, that is to say software, and without software, the computer is useless. You might just as well have an automobile without a driver. It doesn't go anywhere, it just sits there.
This crisis could only be solved by making programming easier to do. If people couldn't talk to computers in binary, perhaps computers could be made to understand a language a bit closer to normal English. The first so-called high-level language that became significantly used was Fortran. Scientists and mathematicians found it relatively easy because it allowed them to write equations in the way they were used to. Businessmen who didn't often write equations didn't find Fortran much help. They needed their own language, one that could handle letters as well as numbers and could process files of data.
For that, you needed a different kind of language, and that led to the development of COBOL, which stands for Common Business-Oriented Language. COBOL was very English-oriented, that is to say, you wrote the programs in a language which was certainly not identical to English, but at least looked like English when you read it and wrote it.
COBOL was a revelation, easy to use and to find errors. And with the help of another piece of software called a compiler, the high-level program is automatically translated back to the binary code that the computer understands.
With the programming problem solved, at least in principle, the stage was set for an endless variety of new uses for computers in all walks of life.
Operating around the clock, this communication center receives and processes all incoming requests for police service.
Computers could now track police cars or pedigree bulls.
In Kansas City, Missouri, the American Hereford Association dedicated a new electronic computer. On hand to push the starting switch, America's grand champion Hereford Bull HR Silver Image 70. This hoof switch started a new IBM 1401 computer that will keep track of all registered Herefords. Silver Image thus became the first animal ever to trace his own ancestry and appeared quite interested in the results.
But most computers were found in administrative offices where armies of clerks were beginning to disappear, replaced by a single computer. Computers also started showing up in factories, controlling machines and processes that once required hundreds of human hands. As computers intruded more and more into the workplace, fears were raised that increased automation might make millions of workers obsolete. For a time, deep passions were aroused.
And it's true that this plant will cause a layoff of some of our loyal workers. However, it's a necessity to do it to be competitive in today's industry.
Movies like Desk Set revealed the conflicting emotions computers stirred up in society. While many people viewed them with fear and disdain, others thought they represented progress, the future, a relief from tedious tasks. Not surprisingly, the staunchest advocates for computers were the computer manufacturers, like IBM's Tom Watson Jr.
A lot of people call these machines giant brains, and whenever I hear the term, it makes me shudder, because they are giant tools. They're certainly not giant brains. And if you have good tools, you're upgrading man, not downgrading him.
That was a common argument, that computers replaced jobs nobody wanted.